Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra.
Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Market Mantra, in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. My name is Rajesh Lake and with me is my co-anchor in Hindi, Manoj Pathak.
नमस्कार, मार्केट मंत्र के ताजा अंक में आपका स्वागत है। आधे घंटे के इस कार्यक्रम में हमेशा की तरह हम देश और दुनिया की चुनी हुई कारोबारी, आर्थिक और शेयर बाजार से जुड़ी हुई ताजा खबरों को लेकर हाजिर हैं। हमारे साथ खबरों पर चर्चा के लिए ऑनलाइन आमंत्रित हैं वरिष्ठ आर्थिक पत्रकार उदयन रे। उदयन, कार्यक्रम में आपका स्वागत है।
वेलकम उदयन।
धन्यवाद। थैंक यू रजनीश।
आइए शुरुआत करते हैं अंग्रेजी में हेडलाइन से, जिसे लेकर मौजूद हैं राजेश लेख।
RBI projects India's growth rate at minus 4.5% for 2020-21. Sensex and Nifty log gains for third session in a row, propped up by financial stocks. And global stocks climb as US and China said they are still committed to phase 1 trade deal.
भारतीय रिजर्व बैंक ने वर्ष 2020-21 के दौरान वृद्धि दर 0 से 4.5% नीचे रहने का अनुमान व्यक्त किया। घरेलू शेयर बाजार में लगातार तीसरे सत्र में आज तेजी। वित्तीय क्षेत्र से जुड़ी कंपनियों के शेयरों की अगुवाई में सेंसेक्स और निफ्टी बढ़त के साथ हुए बंद, और अमेरिका और चीन ने कहा पहले दौर के कारोबार समझौते का पालन करने के लिए वे अभी भी प्रतिबद्ध। दुनिया भर के शेयर बाजारों में इस खबर से आई तेजी।
The Reserve Bank of India has projected India's growth rate at minus 4.5% for 2020-21. In its annual report released today, RBI has projected global growth rate at minus 6% in the single hit scenario and minus 7.6% in the double hit scenario. The report says that expected headline inflation will remain elevated in the current quarter, but likely to ease in the second half of the fiscal year, stating that it is difficult to accurately assess the economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic as the dynamics are still evolving. RBI said it looks like the decline in economic activity reaches its trough in April-June quarter of 2020-21 and recovers thereafter, albeit at a gradual pace. It adds that the growth is likely to turn positive from January-March quarter 2020-21. In its report, RBI has asked for wide-ranging reforms to regain losses due to COVID-19 crisis, adding that it will take quite some time to mend and regain the pre-COVID-19 momentum. Noting that meeting the fiscal targets budgeted in 2020-21 has become even more challenging due to COVID-19, RBI has said that the government must have a clear exit strategy with credible consolidation milestones and timelines in recovering and reworking the path towards fiscal rectitude in the coming years. Udayan, this particular report, which talks of how the COVID-19 can have its impact, further states, and let me finish one more point that it states that the government consumption spending has provided a measure of relief, with the central government's revenue expenditure having risen by 33.7% in the first quarter. It stressed that the pandemic will inflict deep disfigurations on the world economy, adding that the future is heavily contingent upon the evolving intensity, spread and duration of COVID-19 and the discovery of the elusive vaccine. So now I come to the question, and this relates to the consumption. The report is very, very clear about wide-ranging reforms to regain losses due to COVID-19 crisis. all this will happen only when the consumption pattern comes back to its original levels, or rather the March 2020 levels.
Well, Rajesh, that of course, yes, yeah, of course, that's true. But that's easier said than done, because we know that the economic activities have got disrupted. A lot of people have suffered pay cuts. Some people have lost jobs. Some of the sectors haven't even opened up. I mean, the whole hospitality sector, it's kind of all in a freeze. The same with aviation. So when the unlock 4 happens, and then a month or two into it, then we will start getting a decent picture. But private consumption being the way things are, all these local lockdowns that are happening, cases going up. So it's not going to be an easy path of, as far as regaining the mojo is concerned, as far as private consumption is concerned. So therefore, it looks quite plausible, which RBI is talking about, is probably looking at the optimistic scenario of things getting back on track early next year. That can happen, but the way things have been going, Rajesh, I mean, people would be very cautious, and RBI rightly points out, as everybody has been pointing out, that it's very difficult to figure out how things are going to unfold in the next, say, 6, 7, 8 months, because there's so many variables that are working out. But yeah, I mean, we would possibly, it's very ironically, we'll probably be a little more confident, say, in an 18-month scenario, where we know we can feel confident that by that time we'll be back on track. But then, as RBI rightly points out, there's a lot of catching up to do. We've got a very large population which is vulnerable, and a pretty decent section would have got added simply because they would have slipped economically. So not only they'll have to be pulled back up, but you have to, the remaining task of pulling back some of the other guys who we were thinking or we were working on, that has to come back on track. So there's a lot of work to be done, Rajesh.
उदयन, भारतीय रिजर्व बैंक की जो ये रिपोर्ट है, ये जो अनुमान है, उसमें यदि हम वैश्विक अनुमान देखें और घरेलू यानी भारतवर्ष के लिए अनुमान देखें, तो वहां भी यह बहुत साफ दिख रहा है कि वैश्विक जो वृद्धि दर है वह 0 से 6% तक सामान्य, यानी एक बार यदि कह लें कि प्रभावित होती है अर्थव्यवस्था तो होने के आसार हैं, जबकि 0 से 7.6% तक कह लें कि वृद्धि दर घटने का अनुमान है, 0 से नीचे जाने का अनुमान है, जबकि भारत के लिए रिजर्व बैंक का आकलन है कि 0 से 4.5% हम नीचे, यानी हमारा वास्तविक वृद्धि दर रह सकती है। यहां पर यह मैं समझना चाहूंगा आपके माध्यम से कि वैश्विक अर्थव्यवस्था में जब गिरावट आती है, हमने वर्ष 2008 के दौरान देखा था कि दुनिया के अन्य देशों की तुलना में हमारे यहां बेहतर स्थिति रही थी। इसी तरह कोविड का जो प्रभाव हम देख रहे हैं, उससे जो कह लें नुकसान हम देख रहे हैं, ठीक है, आर्थिक मोर्चे पर अपेक्षाकृत कह लें कि नुकसान तो होगा ही, लेकिन कैजुअलिटी के लेवल पर या प्रसार के स्तर पर हमारी आबादी को देखते हुए अन्य देशों की तुलना में हमारे यहाँ बेहतर प्रदर्शन है। तो उम्मीद करें कि आर्थिक मोर्चे पर भी दुनिया में जो गिरावट होगी उसकी तुलना में हम बेहतर रहेंगे।
वो तो उम्मीद करनी चाहिए, क्योंकि हम लोग ग्रोथ पाथ पे थे, हम लोग बढ़त चली थी। हाँ, कुछ दिक्कतें जरूर थी, और ये इस एपिसोड ने हमारे उन कमियों को या वहां पे जो ट्रबल पॉइंट्स थे उसको एक्सपोज कर दिया। तो ये एक बहुत अच्छा मौका है सुधार करने का, फिक्स करने का, जो कि सरकार कर भी रही है। पर एक चीज तो बहुत क्लियर है मनोज, की अगर वैश्विक अर्थव्यवस्था की ग्रोथ उतनी अच्छी नहीं होगी तो हमारे जो निर्यात हम करते हैं वहां पे एक चैलेंज आएगा। ये जैसे कि हमने पीछे के आंकड़े देखे होंगे कि निर्यात में थोड़ा सा बाउंस बैक तो हुआ है, मतलब रिकवरी हुई है। अभी भी हम नेगेटिव टेरिटरी में हैं, नेगेटिव में ही चल रहे हैं ओवरऑल, पर वहां पे बाउंस बैक हुई तो है, पर ये बाउंस बैक होते होते एक जगह जाके स्लो हो जाएगी, क्योंकि वैश्विक अर्थव्यवस्था उस गति से नहीं बढ़ेगी, और अगर उस गति से नहीं बढ़ेगी तो हमारे निर्यात में प्रॉब्लम है, इश्यूज आएंगी, चैलेंजेस आएंगी। और उस संदर्भ में, उस बैकड्रॉप में, ये जो देश के अंदर जो एक रिवाइवल करने की जो एफर्ट है, जो आत्मनिर्भर भारत और दूसरी चीजें जो हम मेक इन इंडिया का एक एक इनिशिएटिव था, उसको बॉल्स्टर करने के, स्ट्रेंथन करने का की बहुत सख्त जरूरत है। तो सबको जो है जहां जहां हम लोग इंपोर्ट कर रहे थे या कुछ और कर रहे थे, कहीं और जा रहा था पैसा, अगर हम इंटरनली कुछ एफर्ट करके ये पूरा ग्लोबलाइज्ड जो वर्ल्ड में हम अपने आप को शट तो नहीं कर सकते हैं, पर जहां जहां बगैर इनएफिशिएंट हुए और महंगा किए हुए हम सब्स्टिट्यूट कर सकते हैं, लोकल मैन्युफैक्चरर्स, लोकल सर्विसेज को हम सपोर्ट कर सकते हैं, वो बड़ा इम्पोर्टेंट हो गया मनोज। तो ये हमें याद रखना पड़ेगा कि इस मुसीबत से निकालने के लिए बाहर के देशों को बेच के या सर्व करके हम नहीं कर पाएंगे, हमें अंदर ही काफी कुछ करना पड़ेगा, जो कि सरकार इस बारे में बात कर रही है और इसको समझ गई है। तो ये बात हमें बिल्कुल अच्छी तरीके से ध्यान रखना पड़ेगा।
Okay, you were absolutely right in saying that it's a long, drawn-out process. But in the last few months, Udayan, we have actually seen fundamentals having absolutely no bearing on what is happening to the market and to the stock valuations. If I were to put it like, it's a bit crazy move, and like you said, eventually over a long period, fundamentals are the biggest factor that eventually supports valuation. Are you still hoping, and are you still believing in the India story beyond the COVID, beyond normalcy would continue?
Absolutely, Rajesh. Now let's look at why I would say it.
Yeah.
See, we were building good bridges, roads, airports, right? Those plans are afoot. That demand would be there, right? We still have things going. What is the change that has happened in the past couple of months? It's because there's an infection and we are not being able to discharge the economic activity, right? And because of which there is a short-term impact in terms of our incomes or liquidity or whatever. Now, once we have a measure, there's no pandemic in written history, recorded history, that has not gone away. We have had, recorded history, we have had pandemics, and they have eventually gone away for whatever scientific reasons. So therefore, we are obviously going to see it through. Nobody's like falling on the ground because of getting infected. It is a bad pandemic. And hopefully we'll see it through. And, as a country, we have got all the resources, intangible and intangible, to see it through. If we don't do it, then there is absolutely no hope, Rajesh. So we will be obviously seeing it through. The question is the lost time, the lost period of progress, and the burden that it is going to put to the people who are on the margin. How smartly we deal with that, that is the whole issue. As regards the lack of link between the way stock markets are moving and the real economy or real data, well, Rajesh, that's all liquidity driven. And that's a known fact. But Rajesh, if the liquidity wasn't given, then you're not giving investors the opportunity to exit from investment. Then that triggers a panic. So the thing that has to be done during such periods is for regulators and governments to ensure there's adequate liquidity in the market, so that by the time things are getting fixed, a scene is getting fixed, there are things, normal activities happen, because without liquidity, you won't be able to do that. So while people should not get carried away with some of the market moves that are happening, eventually it's going to see things through. We had a flu kind of a thing 100 years back. India was also affected. A lot of people died. But we saw it through and normal life came back. So the idea is to be smart, not get affected by it, and make sure that when we are seeing it through, recover lost time like mad. That's what I would say.
Okay. Then the RBI also says and acknowledges the fact that there's going to be decline in economic activity, and it will recover, albeit in a very, very gradual pace. For the recovery to happen, what are the factors that will bring the economy back on track, according to you? Which are the sectors we should be focusing on? Will there be any particular reforms and measures that we should concentrate on, or should we look at another economic stimulus? I know it's too many things.
I think, Rajesh, the government, no government, Rajesh, has unlimited resources, not even the United States or any others, right?
Sure.
So you need to keep your ammunition ready and wait for the right moment. So I think the government is going to do that. It doesn't have endless resources. It doesn't have endless fiscal headroom, right? So let's be honest about it. But having said that, what we need to do is make sure that nobody is going completely off the cliff. So if, people need to be provided for food, they need to be provided for relief, small businesses have to be provided relief, farmers have to be taken care of. See, without farmers, your food chain gets affected. You don't want that to happen. So if small businesses are not taken care of, or people who are self-employed or whatever, migrant labor, they're not taken care of. I mean, there'll be an additional burden. You'll create a large underclass. By the time you're out of this pandemic. So you don't want that to happen. So you basically, if you're making a revival plan or getting a growth, recouping the growth mojo kind of plan, then you have to make sure that you make sure that things don't go out of hand as far as the marginalized or the most impacted people are concerned. So that is it. So you can fix the damage when things start getting okay. And Rajesh, when the economic activities get started, restarted, even if it is happening in small bits and pieces, which already a lot of it has been recouped, you will find that automatically things will come into place. Yes, people will be licking the wounds and the economy will be licking the wounds, but then that probably will be the time that you will need a stimulus. Right now, it is like catching a falling knife or a bottomless pit. Right now you can do as much as you want, but things might not work out. So it has to be very cleverly targeted and has to be done smartly. There is no playbook, unfortunately. So therefore, anybody who even tries to criticize any government, I don't think he or she is being fair. You don't have any playbook. There is no conventional wisdom. This is a brave new, scenario in which people are operating, and we just have to be nice and kind to each other.
आइए खबरों का सिलसिला आगे बढ़ाएं और चलें शेयर बाजार की ओर। घरेलू शेयर बाजार में लगातार तीसरे सत्र में आज तेजी देखने को मिली। बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का सेंसेक्स कारोबार के अंत में 45 अंक यानी 0.12% बढ़कर 38,844 अंक पर बंद हुआ। उधर नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी 6 अंक बढ़कर 11,472 दर्ज हुआ। छोटी और मझोली कंपनियों के शेयरों की लिवाली भी तेज रही। बीएसई मिड कैप इंडेक्स 0.51% लाभ में रहा। स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स में 0.11% की वृद्धि हुई।
Equity benchmark Sensex and Nifty today closed in the green for the third straight session, propped up by financial stocks amid firm global cues. Lack of buying triggers and profit booking in index heavyweight Reliance Industries capped the gains for the benchmarks, traders said. After a choppy session, the BSE index ended 45 points or 0.12% higher at 38,844. The NSE Nifty inched up 6 points or 0.05% to close at 11,472. The broader market at BSE, the mid-cap climbed 0.51% and small-cap gained 0.11%. Bajaj Finance was the top gainer in the Sensex pack, rallying 4.4%, followed by SBI, Tech Mahindra, Asian Paints, Bajaj Finserv, ICICI Bank, IndusInd Bank and Axis Bank. On the other hand, NTPC, Sun Pharma, Nestle India, Tata Steel, L&T, Infosys and Bajaj Auto were among the laggards, shedding up to 1.6%. Global markets were largely positive after the US and China affirmed their commitment to a Phase 1 trade deal. Let's quickly talk about this trade deal affirmation that has come from US and China. It seems that now that the tension is a bit thawed, the trade will go on smoothly, and all across the countries of the world there will be peace for some time.
Well, some of the issues will keep on happening, but there's a lot of politics, as we know, Rajesh, that in the United States they need a little bit of buying on some of the items are being covered under that deal. That will help a certain political dispensation. So some of those things happen. China, fortunately, seems to have recovered its growth momentum back. It's doing pretty well. And you would have seen news and you would have seen visuals. So China can afford to do that. And United States need this. And sometimes, what happens, Rajesh, also, is that when we are doing these discussions, we forget the amount of dependence United States and China have on each other. They've got integrated supply chain. There is investments across each other. So it's a pretty wide-ranging, complex sort of relationship. It's not just one-dimensional. So that does lend a little bit of stability, but you can expect some of those sections to come up and down, but it's never going to hit some kind of a flash point as I see it.
Okay, and today the financial stocks did pretty well. What could be the reason behind their rally?
I think, Rajesh, is primarily because people are feeling good about this.
So it's all to do with sentiments.
Yeah, China thing. Then there is a couple of pandemic-related news that has come in, especially from the U.S., which has come in, and they're feeling a little better about it. So these are some of the things that have actually made the U.S. stock markets go up and generally spread a little bit of cheer all around. Then, as we know, Rajesh, the whole thing is reasonably fickle, and it's going to be fickle for quite some time. So tomorrow, if there is some other stats that are going to be coming in, then it's not going to be all that great. Of course, there are some of the things to be watched out for is all happening in the U.S. So the Fed chairman is supposed to give a speech. People are watching out for that. People are also watching out for home sales figures in the U.S., and they're going to also be watching out for consumer confidence figures. These figures will be coming in. If these are reasonably good figures, tomorrow we can expect a little more cheer happening as well.
उदयन आम यानी प्रत्येक दिन कह लें या नियमित रूप से कह लें कि हम श्रोताओं के लिए आपकी सलाह पूछा करते हैं कि बाजार में जो वर्तमान स्तर है उसमें उन्हें किस तरह से निवेश करना चाहिए और कौन से ऐसे क्षेत्र हो सकते हैं जहां निवेश सुरक्षित रहेगा, बेहतर रिटर्न दे सकेगा।
देखिए मनोज, मैं ओल्ड स्कूल थॉट से आता हूं, तो अगर आप स्टॉक्स में ही कर रहे हैं तो क्षेत्र अगर आप पूछते हैं तो मैं कहूंगा जो कंजम्पशन से जुड़ी हुई कैपिटल कंजम्पशन नहीं, कंज्यूमर गुड्स नहीं, आपकी जो एफएमसीजी है, आपकी जो फार्मास्यूटिकल है, वहां पे आप अच्छी तरीके से परख के वहां पे कैसा फाइनेंशियल परफॉर्मेंस चल रहा है, दूसरे के साथ कैसे कंपैरिजन में कैसे चल रहा है, कैसी कंसिस्टेंसी रही, वो देख के आप डायरेक्ट अगर कर रहे हैं इन दो एरियाज में जिसे डिफेंसिव सेक्टर्स ट्रेडिशनली कहा जाता था, उनके बारे में मैं बात करूंगा। अगर आप इन एरियाज में है नहीं और आप मोबाइल या दूसरे से डायरेक्ट स्टॉक्स में निवेश नहीं करते, जो कि मुझे लगता है कि बेहतर है, तो वो बेहतर नहीं है मुझे लगता है। अगर आप म्यूचुअल फंड या किसी और रूट से करें वो बेहतर होगा। और सिस्टमैटिक इन्वेस्टमेंट प्लान जहां पे हर महीने आप एक फिक्स्ड अमाउंट इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, वो ज्यादा मुझे बेहतर नजर आता है, क्योंकि इस माहौल में आपके एक आम निवेशक को सारी इंफॉर्मेशन को कलेक्ट करके उसको समन्वय करके उसको विश्लेषण करके फिर उस निवेश करना बहुत मुश्किल है। तो मनोज, मैं तो ये कहूंगा कि आप अगर सिस्टमैटिक इन्वेस्टमेंट प्लान लीजिए, अगर किसी और पक्के फंड में ना करके अगर इंडेक्स फंड में भी अगर आप डाल दें, क्योंकि हमें उम्मीद है कि रिकवरी होगी, तो इंडेक्स अगर ऊपर जाएगा तो आपका भी हिसाब किताब ठीक रहेगा। तो मुझे लगता है ये कुछ चीजें आप ध्यान में रख सकते हैं।
Okay, quickly a question about the rally that we have been seeing for the last few months. The Sensex has surged over 51% from its March lows, but is still down about 8% from its all-time high of 42,273 that we hit in the month of January 2020. Way off, but hopefully we'll reach there. What are the kind of opportunities, Udayan, you see in the broader market currently?
Well, Rajesh, people wouldn't like it, but if somebody can look at in the BFSI space and study the options well, if some company is doing well in a battered sector or even automobiles, if somebody is really doing this, let's assume, I am not taking examples of any stock, but let's assume that there is somebody in the automobile sector and defense sector is being opened up, and it's looking promising, and it has got a good grip on how it's going to go about it. These are the kind of things one can still look at after one has actually done bulk of it. If you want to take a little more risk, you can take a look at this, because if a sector is getting battered and some company is showing resilience, that means it has got a lot of strength. The conditions like these actually separate the men from the boys.
Okay.
And that is what you're looking at. Normally in a bullish market, you don't know everybody is doing well. Right now, you will get to know which is the candidate which is doing well, even in a bad scenario. And these are the guys one should be looking at. So that's a contrarian way of looking at it a little bit. But if you are very, very nervous, if you're going to be checking out the papers and everything after making an investment, then this is not what you should be doing. You play safe. But if you are a little more adventurous, maybe these are some of the things that you can look at.
आइए चलें वैश्विक बाजारों की ओर। अमेरिका और चीन की ओर से ये कहे जाने पर कि पहले दौर के वार्ता समझौते को लेकर वो अभी भी प्रतिबद्ध हैं। दुनिया भर के शेयर बाजारों में कुल मिलाकर तेजी देखने को मिली है। एशियाई बाजारों में हालांकि मिला जुला रुख रहा है। निवेशकों की सक्रिय भागीदारी से दक्षिण कोरिया का कोस्पी 1.6% लाभ में रहा। जापान के निक्केई 225 सूचकांक में 1.4% की वृद्धि हुई और सिंगापुर का स्ट्रेट्स टाइम्स इंडेक्स 0.8% ऊपर आ गया। दूसरी ओर बिकवाली के दबाव में हांगकांग का हेंग सेंग 0.3% नीचे बंद हुआ। चीन के शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स में 0.4% की कमी देखने को मिली। यूरोपीय बाजारों की ओर चलें तो अंतर्दिवसीय समाचार तैयार किए जाने तक तेजी बनी हुई थी। अंतर्दिवसीय कारोबार में लंदन का FTSE 100 0.2% ऊपर था। फ्रांस का कैक 41% बढ़त के साथ कारोबार कर रहा था, जबकि जर्मनी के डेक्स में 0.8% की वृद्धि दिख रही थी।
In the U.S., the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq reached a record high closing yesterday as optimism over potential medical advances against the coronavirus pandemic pushed all three major U.S. stock indices higher. The benchmark S&P 500 reclaimed its February closing high last week. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 1.4%, the S&P 500 rose 1%, and the Nasdaq Composite Index surged 0.6%.
रुपए की स्थिति पर ध्यान दें तो अंतर बैंकिंग विदेशी मुद्रा बाजार में $1 की तुलना में रुपया आज बिना किसी उतार चढ़ाव के 74.33 के स्तर पर आ गया। 6 प्रमुख वैश्विक मुद्राओं की तुलना में डॉलर की स्थिति दर्शाने वाला डॉलर इंडेक्स 0.12% नीचे आकर 93.18 दर्ज हुआ।
Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, MSME's Secretary A.K. Sharma today said over 3 lakh have registered in nearly 2 months through the new registration process on the Udyam portal. He said that the process for registration of MSMEs through the government website is absolutely free and cautioned the public not to fall prey to fake websites. Speaking at a webinar organized by Confederation of Indian Industry, Mr. Sharma said private equity funds and venture capital funds will be invited soon. He said for this purpose, a fund of funds with a corpus of 10,000 crore rupees is to be set up to provide equity funding for MSMEs with growth potential and viability. Crude oil prices today rose, supported by production cuts in the U.S. Gulf Coast. The intraday trade, Brent crude prices were trading around $45.60 per barrel, while WTI crude prices were around $42.80 per barrel.
चलें सर्राफा बाजार। दिल्ली सर्राफा बाजार में आज सोने और चांदी की चमक फीकी रही है। सोने का मूल्य 557 रुपए घटा 52,350 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम पर आया। चांदी 1,606 रुपए लुढ़ककर 66,736 रुपए प्रति किलो रह गई। अंतर्राष्ट्रीय बाजारों में सोने का मूल्य थोड़ा सा बढ़ा, $1,930 प्रति आउंस पर पहुंच गया। बस यहीं पर श्रोताओं की ओर से उदयन हम आपको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देना चाहेंगे।
धन्यवाद।
Thank you for being with us, Udayan. And before we close, the headlines once again. RBI projects India's growth rate at -4.5% for 2020-21. Sensex and Nifty log gains for the third session in a row, propped up by financial stocks. Global stocks climb as US and China said they are still committed to Phase 1 trade deal. That's all we have in this edition of Market Mantra. Till tomorrow, goodbye.
Market Mantra. Market Mantra.